Hello friends, now we will be taking a look at a major recent development in the Indo-Sri Lankan relations. So we will be trying to understand how does the recent elections or the 2015 elections in Sri Lanka and the ongoing political transition will affect the Indo-Sri Lanka ties. So in 2015 there were two elections in Sri Lanka, a presidential election as well as the parliamentary election. In the presidential election, the former president of Sri Lanka, Mahinda Rajapakse, was defeated by Maithripala Sirisena. So Mahinda Rajapakse administration had several issues between India and Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka constructed the Hambantota port with the assistance of China. So that was a major issue between India and Sri Lanka, and India's vote against Sri Lanka in the United Nations Human Rights Council was again another major issue. India voted against Sri Lanka on the human rights issue in 2012 as well as 2013. In 2014, we abstained from voting against Sri Lanka, saying that any international investigation to code of conduct during war by a state is an intrusion, is an illegitimate intrusion to the sovereign sphere of the state. So now let's take a look at how does the political transition will affect the Indo-Sri Lanka ties. And so at first there was the presidential election, and in the presidential election, the former president of Sri Lanka, Mahinda Rajapakse, was defeated by Maithripala Sirisena, and there was a parliamentary election. In the parliamentary election, a coalition supported by United National Party as well as Sri Lankan Freedom Party, which was led by Maithripala Sirisena, won the parliamentary election. And RANILE WICKRAMASINGHE became the new Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and a Tamil dominated party became the main opposition party in Sri Lanka. Now let us take a look at what will be the major areas where the Indo-Sri Lanka relations will be improving. So one major concern to India was Sri Lanka's security engagement with China. When the Sri Lankan army did the massive war against the LTTE, India was not ready to give lethal weaponry to Sri Lanka because it might be used against the civilian Tamil population also. So Sri Lanka mainly got weapons from China as well as Pakistan. So this security engagement between Sri Lanka and China is a major cause of concern to India. Currently about 70% of the, so I am stressing the point again, so about 70% of the military hardware of Sri Lanka currently is purchased from China. So that was a major cause of concern for India. And another area of importance is that India's developmental projects in Sri Lanka, especially to rehabilitate the Tamilian population in the northern province, has been hampered due to lack of interest shown by the Mahinda Rajapakse administration. Then another area of cooperation is in the case of stronger trade. Now for Sri Lanka, the massive short-term debt and the financial assistance is got from China is a major cause of concern right now, and the Indian investments in Sri Lanka is rapidly improving, and this will be a major factor in the tremendous growth in India-Sri Lanka economic relations. And now another major area of importance is that now Sri Lanka has got a chance to be a genuine democracy again. In Sri Lanka, the biggest problem is that there is the system of executive presidency, and the executive presidency has been misused by the Rajapakse government to cement his and his family's power on the Sri Lankan politics. So the new Maithripala Sirisena government has promised the people of Sri Lanka that we will be abolishing the executive presidency. Now every presidential candidate in the Sri Lankan presidential elections claim that they will abolish the executive presidency, but that often doesn't happen. But the Maithripala Sirisena administration seems to be committed towards abolishing the executive presidency, and he has taken several steps in reducing the power of the president and all. So now recently two major developments happened after the new administration. So there is now a civilian nuclear cooperation deal between India and Sri Lanka, which was signed between the Narendra Modi government and the new government in Sri Lanka, and this is Sri Lanka's first nuclear deal. So and it signed that nuclear deal with India. So this is a diplomatic masterstroke from India to improve India-Sri Lanka relations and to establish India's foothold in the Sri Lankan region again. During the previous administration, Sri Lanka was becoming more of an ally of China. And another major development is that now the Sri Lankan government has understood that rather than eradicating LTTE military wise, Sri Lankan government also needs to focus on improving the ground level situation and improving the areas of concern or the improving the situation that led to the Sri Lankan civil war. So it needs to improve the rights of the Tamilian population, and it needs to remove if there is any resentment among the Tamilian population against the Sri Lankan government. So for that, the new government has proposed to bring out a new constitution in Sri Lanka, and for that the Sri Lankan parliament has unanimously passed a resolution in converting the parliament to a constitutional assembly in order to draft a new constitution which will be improving the status of minorities in Sri Lanka, and that will be redefining the Sri Lankan constitution so they can remove any kind of resentment against the Sri Lankan government as well as the previous constitution that was held by the minorities like Moors and Sri Lankan Tamils. So these are all the major areas that will be improving in the India-Sri Lanka ties due to the recent elections in Sri Lanka.